Officer Stephen McDonald had been with the Metro Police Department for 14 years when he walked into a situation that would destroy his career, land him in federal prison, and cost taxpayers $12 million. He was 42 years old, experienced enough to recognize federal credentials, trained enough to verify before restraining, but apparently convinced that his assumptions about what a Department of Homeland Security agent should look like were more reliable than the badge hanging around her neck. One Friday afternoon at Riverside Memorial Cemetery, he responded to a call from a groundskeeper who reported a disruptive trespasser refusing to leave a military burial. The trespasser was Senior Special Agent Marian Renteria, an 18-year veteran of the Department of Homeland Security's Counterterrorism Division, standing beside the flag-draped casket of her 24-year-old son, Marine Corporal David Renteria, who died in service to his country 8 days earlier. What Officer McDonald did next, dismissing her federal credentials as counterfeit, ignoring corrections from active-duty Marines, and handcuffing her in front of 150 mourners, including Department of Homeland Security officials and military commanders, would become a watershed moment in federal civil rights enforcement. It would end McDonald's career, trigger a criminal prosecution, and force the city to pay the largest wrongful arrest settlement in its history. A black woman in her mid-40s, Senior Special Agent Marian Renteria, stood in a black suit beside her son's mahogany casket on a cold October afternoon. Her Department of Homeland Security credentials hung from a lanyard around her neck, the gold federal badge visible to anyone who looked. The blue and white federal ID card displayed her photo, her title, her authority.
No disturbance, no trespassing, no violation.
Just a mother standing beside her son's body moments before his burial beneath an American flag. But Officer McDonald saw her through a lens so warped by assumptions about race and authority that he couldn't process a black woman as a federal agent, even with her credentials literally hanging from her neck, even with the folded American flag still in her hands from the Military Honor Guard. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Riverside Memorial Cemetery sits on a sprawling 85-acre property off Veterans Parkway in the northwest suburbs. It's the kind of cemetery where the city's military families have buried their fallen for 120 years. Medal of Honor recipients, Korean War veterans, Vietnam heroes, Iraq and Afghanistan casualties. Marble headstones arranged in precise military rows. Manicured lawns. Century-old maple trees turning brilliant orange and red in late October. The main chapel is a stately brick building with stained glass windows depicting scenes of service and sacrifice. It was 2:32 p.m. on a Friday in October. The temperature hovered at 48 degrees. A sharp wind made the air feel colder than it was. Under a white military burial tent 40 yards from the chapel, 150 people stood in formation. Family, fellow Marines, federal colleagues, local officials. 2 Homeland Security regional directors stood in the second row. 4 Marine Corps officers in dress blues flanked the casket. The city's police chief attended, along with the fire chief and half a dozen city council members. A Marine Corps chaplain stood at attention. The honor guard waited, rifles ready for the 21-gun salute. The kind of crowd that assembles when a young hero dies in service. Marine Corporal David Renteria had been assigned to the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, deployed to East Africa on a humanitarian mission. He'd been distributing medical supplies in a rural village when his convoy was ambushed. He'd shielded 2 civilian children with his own body, taking fire meant for them. He saved their lives and died doing it. 24 years old. Recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor posthumously awarded. His mother, Senior Special Agent Marian Renteria, had accepted the medal 3 days earlier at a ceremony at Camp Lejeune. Her hands had trembled as the commandant placed the medal in her palm. Her voice had broken when she thanked the Marine Corps for honoring her son's sacrifice. Senior Special Agent Marian Renteria had served with the Department of Homeland Security for 18 years. 18 years of protecting the homeland from terrorist threats, dismantling trafficking networks, coordinating with international law enforcement agencies. She'd risen from field agent to senior special agent in charge of the Chicago Counterterrorism Task Force, one of only 14 women to hold that position nationwide. She'd led operations that prevented 3 major attacks on domestic soil. She'd testified before Congress on border security and intelligence sharing. She'd received the DHS Secretary's Award for Exceptional Service twice. Federal law enforcement journals profiled her leadership. Training academies used her case studies to teach crisis management and interagency coordination. She'd graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern University in 1997 with a degree in criminal justice. Then earned her master's in Homeland Security from George Washington University in 2003. She'd started as a customs enforcement agent at O'Hare International Airport, working narcotics interdiction and document fraud cases. Within 3 years, she'd transferred to counterterrorism. She'd worked undercover operations in Chicago's immigrant communities, building trust, developing sources, disrupting radicalization networks before they could operationalize. She'd spent 6 months embedded with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. She'd been promoted to special agent in charge at 39, the youngest woman in DHS history to hold the position. At 46 years old, Agent Renteria was exactly where 2 decades of sacrifice had positioned her. Respected, trusted, and responsible for protecting millions of people from threats most would never know existed. She'd missed birthdays for surveillance operations. She'd worked Christmas mornings because terrorists don't take holidays. She'd raised David mostly alone after his father walked out when David was 4. She'd attended parent-teacher conferences between counterterrorism briefings. She'd helped him with college applications while managing federal task forces. She'd been there when he enlisted in the Marines at 19, even though the thought of losing him terrified her. She'd been there at his boot camp graduation, at his promotion to corporal, at his deployment send-off. And 8 days ago, she'd flown to Dover Air Force Base to receive his flag-draped casket as it returned home. That Friday, Senior Special Agent Renteria had sat in the front row of the chapel and listened as the Marine chaplain spoke about honor, duty, and sacrifice. She'd watched as the honor guard carried her son's casket outside toward the burial site. She'd walked beside the casket, one hand resting on the smooth mahogany beneath the American flag. She wore a simple black suit, pearl earrings, low heels. Her DHS credentials hung from a lanyard around her neck, a laminated ID card with her photo, name, title, and the Gold Department of Homeland Security badge. Not hidden in a purse or pocket. Visible. She'd worn them intentionally, knowing she'd be surrounded by federal and military personnel who might need to verify her identity for security protocols. She looked like what she was, a federal agent and a grieving mother walking beside her hero son's casket. She'd spoken to no one except immediate family. She'd caused no disturbance. She'd violated no protocol. But to the cemetery groundskeeper standing near the equipment shed, Senior Special Agent Marian Renteria's presence at this burial didn't make sense. And that groundskeeper decided to do something about it. Thomas Fletcher was 62 years old. He'd been a groundskeeper at Riverside Memorial Cemetery for 19 years, maintaining the grounds, managing burial preparations, and keeping what he called proper order on the property. He was particular about protocol, obsessed with maintaining what he called the dignity and tradition of a military cemetery. He wanted Riverside to be the premier veterans cemetery in the region, the place where military families felt their fallen heroes were honored properly, a place where white families, in particular, felt their traditions were protected. Over 19 years, Fletcher had developed a reputation. Staff members described him as overly concerned about who belonged where, quick to question mourners who didn't fit his mental image of military families. He'd questioned a Muslim family attending a burial, asking if they were at the right ceremony. He'd demanded identification from a Hispanic man in a Marine uniform, convinced he was impersonating military personnel. He'd instructed security to watch certain families more closely, families whose race didn't match what Fletcher expected to see at a military funeral. 7 formal complaints had been filed against Fletcher over 12 years. A Black Navy veteran's widow reported that Fletcher questioned whether she had authorization to visit her husband's grave. A Latino Gold Star mother reported Fletcher asking repeatedly for proof she was the deceased's mother. An Asian American Marine's family reported Fletcher calling security on them when they arrived for the burial. Each complaint had resulted in diversity training that Fletcher attended but never absorbed. Management considered him valuable. He kept the grounds immaculate. He managed maintenance effectively. Veteran families praised the cemetery's appearance. So the complaints were noted, filed, and essentially ignored. That Friday afternoon, Fletcher had been watching the Renteria burial from his position near the equipment building. Military funeral, honor guard, federal officials. He'd seen the Marines in dress blues, the DHS personnel, the local dignitaries. Everything had proceeded according to protocol until the casket was carried to the burial site. That's when Fletcher noticed something that didn't fit his expectations. A black woman walking beside the casket with her hand on the flag. He pulled out the burial order on his clipboard. The deceased was Marine Corporal David Renteria, 24 years old. Killed in action. Next of kin listed as Mother, Marion Renteria, Senior Special Agent, Department of Homeland Security. Fletcher had interacted with Agent Renteria exactly once, 11 days earlier, when she'd come to arrange the burial. She'd been professional, composed, devastated, and white. At least that's what Fletcher remembered. Or maybe he'd just assumed. Or maybe he'd confused her with someone else from the funeral home staff. But in Fletcher's mind, the woman walking beside the casket couldn't be Agent Renteria. Federal agents were important people. Important people in law enforcement, in Fletcher's experience, were usually white. This woman was black. Therefore, this woman must be an imposter. Or a mourner who'd gotten too close to the family. Or someone trying to disrupt a military funeral for attention. Fletcher's mind created a narrative built entirely on racial assumptions. He didn't check the woman's face against any photos. He didn't ask the Marines standing 10 feet away if they knew who she was. He didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, his memory was wrong. He just pulled out his phone and called 911. He reported a disruptive trespasser at a military funeral. Someone who claimed to be family but couldn't be. Someone who needed to be removed before the burial began, before this person dishonored a fallen Marine service. Officer Stephen McDonald was 42 years old. He'd been with the Metro Police Department for 14 years, mostly working patrol and special event security. He was experienced, trained in de-escalation, certified in crisis intervention. He'd received 4 commendations for professional conduct. But he'd also compiled a less visible record. 12 complaints over 14 years. For involved accusations of profiling black drivers during what McDonald called routine traffic stops. 3 involved excessive force allegations during arrests of black suspects. 2 cases settled quietly by the city with no admission of wrongdoing. 5 involved complaints about dismissive or hostile behavior toward black residents during service calls. Each complaint had been investigated. 5 were sustained, resulting in written reprimands and mandatory retraining. 7 were closed without findings. But the pattern was documented. McDonald had difficulty seeing black people as credible, as legitimate, as deserving of the same respect he extended to white citizens. And despite 12 complaints in 14 years, he remained on full duty. McDonald arrived at Riverside Cemetery at 2:28 p.m. He'd been patrolling 3 blocks away when the call came in. Disruptive trespasser at military funeral. Groundskeeper requesting removal. Straightforward enough. He pulled into the cemetery, parked near the chapel, and walked toward the burial site where people stood under the white tent. Fletcher met him at the pathway and pointed. "That's her. The woman in black next to the casket holding the flag. She's not supposed to be here. She's disrupting the ceremony." McDonald's training should have kicked in. Verify the complaint. Ask questions. Speak to the subject calmly. Assess the situation before acting. But McDonald looked where Fletcher was pointing and saw a black woman standing close to a flag-draped casket at a military funeral, holding the folded flag that belonged to the family. And in McDonald's mind, shaped by years of assumptions he'd never examined, that had to be wrong. He walked directly toward Senior Special Agent Renteria. "Do you think law enforcement officers who make arrests without verifying credentials should face automatic suspension and retraining? Drop your answer below." Senior Special Agent Marion Renteria was standing at the head of her son's casket, the folded American flag cradled in her arms, when she became aware of heavy footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a police officer approaching. His expression flat and professional, but his body language aggressive. Shoulders squared, jaw set, hand near his belt. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the casket." Renteria's face registered confusion. She glanced at the Marines standing at attention 6 feet away, then back at the officer. "I'm his mother." The officer's eyes scanned her quickly. Her suit, her age, her race. His expression hardened into something resembling absolute certainty. "The family is over there." He gestured vaguely toward a group of mourners. "This is a private military burial." Renteria felt disbelief collide with rising anger. Around her, the ceremony had stopped. Marines turned. Federal agents looked up. Conversations died. Phones came out. "I am the family. This is my son. Marine Corporal David Renteria." The officer's tone flattened into dismissiveness. "The deceased's mother is a federal agent. You need to leave the area now, or I'll have to remove you." Renteria's breath caught. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then she lifted her credentials from around her neck, the gold DHS badge catching the afternoon light. "I am Senior Special Agent Marion Renteria, Department of Homeland Security. This is my son's funeral." McDonald glanced at the credentials. His expression didn't change. His voice remained flat, certain, dismissive. "That badge is fake. Federal agents don't look like you." The words hung in the cold October air. Around them, 150 people had gone completely silent. Marines staring. Federal officials stepping forward. Phones recording everything. October 27, 2023, dawned cold and overcast at Riverside Memorial Cemetery. By mid-morning, the temperature had climbed to 48 degrees, but the wind cut through coats and made mourners pull their collars tight. The burial tent stood ready on Section 12, Military Row, where generations of service members rested beneath identical white marble markers aligned in perfect formation. The groundskeepers had prepared the gravesite with military precision. The tent anchored against the wind, chairs arranged in rows, the excavation concealed beneath a green covering. Everything ready to receive Marine Corporal David Renteria. David had been born at Cook County Hospital on March 15, 1999. His mother, Marion, had been 22 years old, already working her way through her criminal justice degree while raising a son alone. She'd worked double shifts as a campus security officer to pay for daycare. She'd studied while David slept in a bassinet beside her desk. She'd graduated when he was 4, joined customs enforcement when he was 5, and moved into counterterrorism when he was 8. David had grown up watching his mother protect strangers. It shaped him. By high school, he'd decided he wanted to serve too. He'd enlisted in the Marine Corps 3 days after his 19th birthday. Boot camp at Paris Island. Infantry training at Camp Lejeune. He'd deployed twice. Afghanistan first, then East Africa. He'd sent his mother photos from both deployments. Him with village children. Him distributing food. Him standing beside his squad. The last photo she'd received showed David holding a Somali girl who couldn't have been more than 5, both of them smiling at the camera. That was 11 days before the ambush that killed him. Marion Renteria had joined U.S. Customs Enforcement in 2005, fresh out of Northwestern with a criminal justice degree and a 4-year-old son to support. She'd started at O'Hare International Airport, working document fraud cases and narcotics interdiction. Long hours, irregular shifts, daycare pickups at midnight when operations ran late. David had learned to fall asleep in the break room while his mother finished reports. He'd done homework at her desk while she interviewed suspects. He'd grown up inside federal law enforcement. By 2008, Marion had transferred to the newly formed Counterterrorism Division. The work was classified. The hours were worse. The stakes were everything. She'd missed David's 8th birthday because of a surveillance operation that prevented an attack on the Chicago Transit Authority. She'd worked through Christmas Eve 2010 because a credible threat doesn't pause for holidays. She'd been promoted to special agent at 32, supervising a team of 12 agents working radicalization cases across the Midwest. David had been 13, learning to cook dinner for himself because his mother was protecting the city from threats he'd never know about. At 39, she'd become senior special agent in charge of the Chicago Counterterrorism Task Force, the youngest woman in DHS history to hold the position. Responsibility for coordinating federal, state, and local intelligence operations across 6 states. Budget oversight, personnel management, congressional testimony, media briefings after foiled plots. David had been 17, applying to colleges, considering his future. When he told her he wanted to enlist, Marion had felt terror and pride in equal measure. She'd spent 18 years protecting strangers from violence. Now her son wanted to do the same. She'd driven him to the recruiter's office. She'd stood beside him when he took the oath. She'd saluted him at his boot camp graduation, federal agent to Marine, mother to son. Thomas Fletcher had worked at Riverside Memorial Cemetery for 19 years. He'd started as a maintenance worker in 2004, mowing lawns and trimming hedges. By 2010, he'd been promoted to head groundskeeper, responsible for maintaining the entire 85-acre property. He took pride in the work, kept the grass pristine, the headstones clean, the flag markers straight on veterans' graves. He saw himself as a guardian of sacred ground, protecting the dignity of those who'd served. But Fletcher had another pattern, one documented in 7 formal complaints filed with cemetery management between 2011 and 2023. In 2011, he'd called police on a black woman visiting her husband's grave in Section 8, convinced she was vandalizing headstones. She'd been a Navy veteran's widow, placing flowers on the anniversary of his death. In 2014, he'd demanded identification from a Latino family at a graveside burial, certain they were at the wrong funeral. They'd been burying their father, a Korean War veteran. In 2017, he'd reported an Asian American man as suspicious for visiting graves in the officers section. The man had been a retired Army colonel visiting fallen comrades. Each complaint followed the same pattern. Fletcher saw non-white families in areas he associated with white military tradition and assumed they didn't belong. He'd never called police on white families, no matter how long they stayed or how often they visited. Only black families, Latino families, Asian families, people whose presence disrupted his mental image of who belonged at a military cemetery. That Friday afternoon, Fletcher watched Marion Renteria walk beside her son's casket. Black woman, federal credentials, military funeral. It didn't fit. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. I need police at Riverside Cemetery. We have a trespasser disrupting a military burial. She's refusing to leave. Someone needs to remove her before this gets out of hand. Officer Stephen McDonald had been with Metro Police for 14 years. He'd started patrol in 2009, worked his way through traffic enforcement, special events security, and community policing assignments. He'd received 2 commendations. One for apprehending a robbery suspect in 2012. Another for de-escalating a domestic violence situation in 2016. His personnel file documented a competent, experienced officer. But buried deeper in that same file were 12 complaints spanning 14 years. For traffic stop complaints from black drivers who claimed McDonald had profiled them, searching vehicles without cause, demanding identification without justification. 3 excessive force allegations during arrests of black suspects. Witnesses reported McDonald using force that exceeded what situations required, escalating rather than de-escalating. 2 settlements paid quietly by the city to avoid litigation. 5 complaints about hostile behavior toward black residents during service calls. Dismissive tone. Refusal to take reports seriously. Assumptions of criminality before gathering facts. Internal Affairs had investigated each complaint. 5 were sustained, resulting in written reprimands and mandatory bias training that McDonald attended but never internalized. 7 were closed as unfounded, despite witness statements suggesting otherwise. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. McDonald treated black citizens differently, saw them as threats first, people second, viewed their words as less credible, their presence as more suspicious, their rights as more negotiable. McDonald received the cemetery call at 2:26 p.m., disruptive trespasser at military funeral. He radioed for backup and drove 3 blocks to Riverside. He arrived expecting trouble, primed to remove someone who didn't belong. Fletcher met him at the entrance, pointing toward the burial tent. Black woman by the casket. Won't leave. Family wants her gone. McDonald didn't ask which family members complained. Didn't request Fletcher's documentation. Didn't question the story. He just walked toward the tent, hand near his belt, ready to act. Marion Renteria stood at the head of her son's casket, the folded American flag cradled against her chest. The flag was still warm from the honor guard's hands. 13 folds, each one representing something. Honor, sacrifice, the nation her son had died protecting. She held it like she'd held David as an infant. 24 years between those 2 moments. Birth and burial. She heard footsteps behind her, turned, saw the officer approaching with purpose. Ma'am, you need to step away from the casket. Marion's confusion showed before she could control it. I'm his mother. McDonald's eyes swept over her. Black woman, business suit, holding the flag. His expression hardened. The family is over there. This is a private military burial. I am the family. This is my son. The deceased's mother is a federal agent. You need to leave now. Marion lifted her credentials with one hand, still holding the flag with the other. The gold DHS badge caught the afternoon light. I am Senior Special Agent Marion Renteria, Department of Homeland Security. This is my son's funeral. McDonald took the credentials, examined them front and back, studied the photo, read the text. His jaw tightened. These look suspicious. Federal badges don't look like this. Behind Marianne, a Marine Staff Sergeant stepped forward. Officer, that's Agent Renteria. We verified her identity when we arrived. McDonald ignored him. A DHS regional director moved closer. Officer, I can verify her credentials. She's one of ours. McDonald keyed his radio. This is Unit 47. I need backup at Riverside Cemetery. Multiple subjects interfering with a police action. Possible impersonation of a federal officer. Around them, phones rose, recording everything. McDonald grabbed Marianne's arm. She pulled back instinctively, still holding the flag. Officer, I'm a federal agent. You need to verify my credentials before. Turn around. Hands behind your back. This is my son's funeral. I'm showing you my badge. Just call my office. Call DHS. They'll confirm. McDonald wrenched her arm behind her back. The folded flag fell from Marianne's hands, hitting the ground beside her son's casket. The sight of it, the American flag David had died for, lying in the dirt, broke something inside her. She made a sound that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. You're dropping the flag. My son's flag. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Cold metal. Tight. McDonald pushed her forward, forcing her to face the casket. Her son's casket. The flag on the ground between them. A Marine captain stepped directly in front of McDonald. Officer, I'm ordering you to release her. That woman is a federal agent and the mother of the Marine we're burying. Step back or you're under arrest for obstruction. 2 DHS agents moved forward, both displaying credentials. Officer, we're Department of Homeland Security. That's our boss. You need to release her immediately. McDonald's backup arrived. 2 more patrol cars. For officers. McDonald pointed at the Marines and federal agents. Anyone who interferes with this arrest will be handcuffed and charged. I don't care what badges you're wearing. Back away from the subject. Marianne stood in handcuffs beside her son's casket, watching her colleagues and David's fellow Marines holding up phones, recording the moment a police officer arrested a grieving mother at her hero son's funeral. The flag still lay in the dirt. Captain Rebecca Martinez arrived at 2:41 p.m., 9 minutes after the first frantic call from a DHS regional director. She'd been in a meeting downtown when her phone exploded with calls from federal officials, Marines, and city council members, all reporting the same thing. One of her officers was arresting a federal agent at a military funeral. Martinez pushed through the crowd surrounding the burial tent and stopped cold. She recognized Marianne Renteria immediately. They'd worked together on a joint terrorism task force in 2020. 3 months of coordinated operations, daily briefings, shared intelligence. Martinez had attended the ceremony when Marianne received the DHS Secretary's Award. Officer McDonald, remove those handcuffs immediately. McDonald turned, surprised. Captain, this woman is impersonating a federal agent. Her credentials are... That woman is Senior Special Agent Marianne Renteria. I've worked with her. I know her. Remove the handcuffs now. Martinez didn't wait. She stepped forward, pulled her own keys, and unlocked the cuffs herself. Marianne's wrists were red where the metal had bitten into skin. Martinez bent down, picked up the fallen flag, and handed it to Marianne with both hands. Agent Renteria, I am so sorry. This should never have happened. Then Martinez turned to McDonald. Officer Stephen McDonald, you are under arrest for violation of civil rights under color of law. You have the right to remain silent. The backup officers stood frozen, uncertain. Martinez's voice cut through their hesitation. Someone cuff him. Now. As McDonald was handcuffed by his own colleagues, Martinez faced the crowd of mourners, Marines, and federal agents, all still recording. On behalf of the Metro Police Department, I apologize. We failed today. We failed Agent Renteria. We failed her son's memory. That ends now. By 4 p.m., the videos had been viewed 2 million times. By 6 p.m., every major news network was running the footage. A federal agent in handcuffs beside her son's flag-draped casket. The American flag lying in the dirt. Marines standing at attention, helpless. The sound of Marianne's voice breaking as she said, "This is my son's funeral." The Department of Homeland Security issued a statement at 5:30 p.m. Senior Special Agent Marianne Renteria is a decorated federal law enforcement officer with 18 years of exemplary service. The treatment she received today while burying her son, a fallen Marine, is unconscionable. We are cooperating fully with federal investigators and expect complete accountability. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation at 6:15 p.m. Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. If convicted, McDonald faced up to 10 years in federal prison. The governor called Marianne at 7 p.m. She didn't answer. She was sitting in her living room, staring at the folded flag on her coffee table, trying to process that she'd buried her son and been arrested on the same day. Riverside Cemetery terminated Thomas Fletcher at 8 p.m., citing gross misconduct and racial discrimination. His personnel file, including all 7 complaints, was released to the press. By 9 p.m., protesters had gathered outside Metro Police Headquarters. 500 people holding signs. Justice for Agent Renteria. Black federal agents matter. Fire racist cops. Local civil rights organizations demanded McDonald's termination, criminal prosecution, and a federal review of the entire department's hiring and training practices. The story dominated every news cycle for a week. Marianne Renteria filed her federal lawsuit on November 15, 2023. Civil rights violation. Unlawful arrest. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Violation of the 4th and 14th Amendments. The complaint ran 47 pages and included testimony from 23 witnesses, all of whom had watched a federal agent be handcuffed at her son's funeral. During discovery, McDonald's complete personnel file became public record. 12 complaints spanning 14 years. 5 sustained violations. 7 closed without adequate investigation. Internal Affairs had documented the pattern but never acted on it. The department had paid 2 settlements to avoid litigation, then returned McDonald to full duty without meaningful intervention. The city had known and done nothing. On March 12, 2024, Marianne testified before the House Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Civil Rights. She sat at the witness table in a navy suit, the same suit she'd worn to David's funeral. She spoke for 17 minutes without notes. "My son died protecting civilians in East Africa. He took bullets meant for children. The Marine Corps gave him the Bronze Star for valor. His country gave him a hero's burial. And a police officer arrested me beside his casket because he couldn't believe a black woman could be a federal agent. The institutions my son died protecting failed him in death. Failed me. Failed every family of color who's ever been treated as suspicious simply for existing in spaces others think we don't belong." The city settled for $12 million on April 8, 2024. The largest wrongful arrest settlement in city history. McDonald was convicted of federal civil rights violations on June 3, 2024. 2 years in federal prison. Marianne Renteria retired from DHS in September 2024 and now works as a federal oversight consultant, training law enforcement agencies nationwide on recognizing and dismantling institutional bias.